Steve Jones here with the Hardscape channel and Pave Tech, and I've got with me Gary Stowe. Gary,
Steve, nice
thanks
to
for
see
letting me
you
talk and you coming up to the studio here at the wonderful, what are we at the Hyatt? Where are we?
again. Wyndham.
Wyndham, sorry. The wonderful Wyndham in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the ICPI mid-year meetings. And Gary and I were just at the Hardscape North America committee meeting. You brought up a good question in the meeting that we've never been able to fully address. An important part of our market, geography, is the West Coast. And the geography is, there's the Rocky Mountains, and of course we call you left coastists, as you well know.
There's many reasons for that.
So what I'm asking you is, I mean, your question was fair. I mean, I maybe gave it short shrift in the meeting because I've flogged that pony way too many times. But it's why can't we transplant Hardscape North America or a version or component thereof and move it to the West Coast to serve an important market?
Well, I think we're missing a whole part of the country. It's prohibitive for someone who doesn't exactly know what the show is about to spend the amount of money, minimum $500 for a plane ticket, plus the hotel fare. So you're talking $1,000, $1,500 for one person to come to the Hardscape show. Without a lot of background on what's there and what they'll gain from that, it's hard to see what the return on your investment is going to be. Be much easier and a way to get them involved in it if we could start smaller by having something on the West Coast. You know, we don't have to have a completely elaborate show. Our first Hardscape shows in Nashville weren't that significant.
But we had a lot of people and a lot of enthusiasm, and that's really what made it through the first few years.
Well, exactly. And I mean, we made an investment to get there.
But, Gary, where's the enthusiasm? I have you. We have you. Where's the rest? Where's the team?
Has the question been asked? Has it been presented to them? Are they, you know?
It's when I was chair of H&A, and that came up continually. And our current chair, Fred Adams, actually was, as usual, did a very smart thing and moved it on to the exposition committee, because that is such a thing fraught with politics and individual and corporate interests that it would really move us off track at Hardscape North America for program development and the show. I haven't been able to find, when at least I had an interest in that, it was to find enough people to generate enough energy and, let's face it, dollars to make West Coast happen.
I find it hard to believe that we can't get that group together. Even our chapter, when we had little mini shows, could get a lot of people to come home and generate some interest from the manufacturers to present items.
Well, our failure was, and perhaps the failure is based on the fact is we approached all the producers or the producer side. But I remember with Joe Bowen reaching out to producers, trying to build the energy and the support sponsorship for a show on the West Coast, and maybe need to touch base with him and find out really what the roadblocks to that were. To me, it was like, wow, that they really don't have an interest in this. But that was back, it was just from a producer standpoint. We've never had somebody with your business experience and as a contractor push hard for a West Coast event. It's, moving H&A to West Coast probably isn't going to happen just because of the demographics and the financial thing. Plus, we've got a really great relationship with GIE, both location and the relationship with the co-sponsorship. What do we got out west?
Well, we have the seed of an idea out west, and we have an example in H&A and how to do it. Let's take what we've learned from H&A and then produce it out there. It can't be that difficult, and it can't be that expensive to generate another show out there to bring the industry together.
Well, it's interesting. I think H&A is partially a success because it doesn't compete with your standard spring schedule shows that are typical for the landscape industry. what are things to think about for a West Coast show? Now we have to. It can't be in the same time frame because you're suckling off of the same vendors. So I cannot field two exhibits at the same time. I don't have the people. I don't have the equipment. It's just not going to happen. So if we're looking at that as one of the criteria we have to work, or one of the issues we have to work around, the other is finding those people, contractors, vendors, producers that are willing to step forward and say, I do.
Well, we'll have to explore those possibilities, but certainly we could hold a spring show on the West Coast. We aren't as driven as the East Coast side by the weather. We work all year long, so.
Except from a vendor side. Remember that this is when most of the vendors serve the spring shows, mid-states and east. So trying to find vendors that can field a couple of exhibit teams is tough. So you have to probably, with the most companies' schedules, I mean the vendor companies like myself, you get through March. April's good, and I don't know what works out in California. On the West Coast, I have no idea.
Well, the West Coast is a completely different animal. Let's try something different.
Well, okay, but then we got to come up with a schedule. Something. What's the best time of year, and really, if we're looking to co-opt or cohabitate or coexist with another show, we have to identify those shows and see what their schedule is, because that's going to be our biggest limiting factor, is find out who will have us.
Do you really think it needs to be one that's combined with another show?
Well, when we started H&A, we were alone. I mean, our egos got in the way, and it was growing, but it was growing slowly, and it was hard to maintain that huge amount of investment and interests year to year to year, only for a little bit of growth. Could we have survived alone? Yeah, definitely. But there was also no revenue for all that effort at the end, so we never brought revenue back, or very little. When we started working with Green Industries, now we started to see some revenue, and ultimately every organization and company has to create revenue. And so we finally filled that last little piece of the puzzle for H&A. Now, if the West Coast is truly that in need of that kind of support.
Well, see, I wouldn't say it's in need of that type of support. If, as an industry, we are trying to promote the best in the industry and we are the industry leader, then we need to move forward and present this information to a broad spectrum of people. And the entire West Coast is being left out in a lot of this that we do. We go back to so many of the issues that we're dealing with. Are we the leader in the industry, and are we going to put our name out there as the one to follow?
Good point today, because no, we don't do that job anymore. We used to focus on trying to let people know who ICPI was. That fell to the wayside a long time ago, and I don't know why, because if people don't know who you are, what you represent, don't know that you're claiming to be the industry lead for technical and other things, then you still have to promote yourself.
Well, it seems very self-serving, but that's what we're going to have to do if we're going to get our point across. It doesn't mean a thing to someone if we promote a certain technique or a certain company or a certain certified installer if they don't know who you are.
Agreed. I'm fully
your recommendation is worthless if you're unknown.
Well, then you're fighting with an engineer that says, well, I've got this thing here from some organization called ICPI, and the contractor saying to you, don't listen to them. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'll let you know how it works. So we still get a lot of that. And yeah, I believe that we, as an industry, we probably have done ourselves, or an association, I'll say, done ourselves a disservice by not doing a better job, continuing to promote who we are and what we do.
So that gets back to my point, why we need a West Coast show. If we're going to be a national company, we need to have a national presence, and it may cost us a little bit of money to do that.
It's investment.
But that's my point exactly. There's not a business around that goes into anything new that doesn't expect to invest a little money at first in hopes for the outcome in the
Yep.
future.
You just have to be smart enough to know when, if it did or didn't work, and when to pull the plug.
Mm-hmm.
So, or when to invest more to keep it growing.
Right.
Those are pretty simple concepts. I don't know that I employ them all the time as a businessman. I don't know how about you?
Sometimes you got to go with your gut instinct and do it until you can prove to yourself that it doesn't work.
Or the wife yells at you and says, "Stop it! It's hurting."
Yeah.
I've been there. Well, Gary, I think for the West Coast, you've set yourself a big task. You're going to go to the meeting tomorrow morning?
Oh yeah, I'll definitely be there, but I haven't set myself for a task. I've set a task for our trade association.
Yeah, nice duck. Nice. True. But if there isn't a champion for that, if Joe Bowen's here, he was one that really wanted to see something on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably a champion for that. So you've got to find somebody to help. And they've got to be, I think, Joel, who was just up here earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Or did I get him up here yet today? No, I didn't. But Joel Guth from IQ Power Tools.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good man, West Coast guy. And you know what? He'll be all for it. And so, anyway, I'll do what I can. I mean, I'll talk to my guys, and we got to find the people to see, and really to find out if there's enough interest by the people that we have that are willing to do it. It can't be you. It can't be one other person. It's got to be a number of us that are willing to get behind it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It sounds so positive. Sure. Let's work on that level of outward enthusiasm.
I've been here too long.
I know. I understand. Well, Gary, you're the incoming chairman of the construction committee at ICPI. What do you look forward to as your first big challenge? May not be the right word, but first big task that you're setting for yourself?
To define what the construction committee does now. Education is no longer our mainstay, and certainly construction techniques should be one of the vital interests that we have, but we haven't got any strong ones on the horizon. I hope that we can redefine what the construction committee does and move from there.
That's true. Once the association decided that education was no longer, contractor education was no longer a purview of the only contractor committee we have, then really kind of just it pulled the wind out of the sails.
As it had been defined, but as I see it, every technique we have needs to be scrutinized and reviewed. So if we have ideas out there, we need to bring them forward. Techniques that haven't been tried need to be tried, new products, all that comes into play.
You know, it's interesting that when this industry started, that, even like the sand specifications and stuff, a lot of stuff they kind of created engineering out of stuff that they just found that worked. There wasn't any engineering before they, it's like the Romans had no engineering before they figured out how to do the stone paving, right? So, but now we have engineers that create the engineering aspect of why it worked. It was an explanation of why it worked, but engineering is now what created it. So it's kind of, to me at least, it's kind of one of the industries that's actually come at it from the backside. Usually the engineers create a concept, they prove it out, and then it's implemented in construction. Here, the Romans figured out how something worked and implemented it, and now we have engineers doing all they can do to create this engineering thing that supports it. So nothing against the engineers. It's a task. It's a challenge for them to do that. But today, if we don't define our skills and our materials better than we do right now,
Well, I think we have to improve our techniques too. If we're going to go from the 1.7 square feet to 4 square feet, as is the goal, then we've got to get the price down there. And I hate to say it that way because the product is an excellent one, but we can't do these huge projects and expect to make the $8, $9 a square foot prices. It's not going to work.
Charge, not make. So
Yeah, the charge. So it's much as I do with any young guy that works for me, you first have to take the step of figuring out how to do it. You know, go through the techniques, make sure that you can do a commercially acceptable job and get it done. The next step then is to figure out how to do it economically so that you can make money at it. And I think we're kind of at that point now. We've learned pretty well how to do it so that we can get the end product done. It's not the most efficient, it's not the most inexpensive way to do it. We now have to learn those techniques that will provide the economy-based product that we need to produce to get the large numbers of pavers installed.
So the only way you can achieve efficiencies in a labor-based skill like what we have is better techniques in the application of mechanical advantage, and that means tools and equipment. And because my other hat is pave tech. I mean, obviously, I have a vested interest in people using more equipment, but the reason that I do that is because when I first started, segmental paving work, it was brutal. And even with the application of all of the best stuff from Europe, all the tools and equipment and stuff that we have today, still kind of hard.
It's still a manual trade.
And yet I see guys every day beating themselves to death, physically sacrificing their bodies to get work done, as I did when I was younger, and I'm sure you did too. Today, my back, my knees, I mean. So you sacrifice body, your physical well-being to move forward in a business, and that's crazy. If you think about, at my age and at your age, you kind of go, that wasn't the smartest thing I ever did. Should have saved a little more of myself for myself. So, again, at the meeting this morning, we talked about a little bit about skills, at the contractor subcommittee, education subcommittee, about skills versus learning, a learning thing. And you can't teach a skill in a PowerPoint.
It doesn't make much sense if the person has never been out there and experienced the job site. Early on, we also had a minimum number that you should have laid before you ever got into the class, and that went by the wayside as well.
So much for the prerequisites, huh?
Yeah, that was such an essential part of that for those people who are coming into it fresh and never been out on a job site and laid a paver, done base.
They just slow the classes down.
It's Greek to them when they go through it in the class.
It's all about teaching to the test and get them to pass the test.
Unfortunately, that has a certain aspect to it. We have taken a step in the right direction in the contractor development program, in which we require some experience to go along with that. That's a nice step, my baby step, but it's a little better.
You got to move forward at least a little bit, otherwise you kind of get depressed. Well, Gary, I mean, there's still huge challenges ahead for us all to get our industry to move forward. And the tasks really are to convince others within our industry that it's the contractors that are the only ones, by improving their lot, by improving, not by giving them anything, but by allowing them to earn the skills and knowledge that they need to do the job and work efficiently and correctly.
Well, we need to identify it as a trade so that someone has some pride in saying I am a paving stone installer, other than saying that I'm the workhorse on the grunt labor crew.
Well, we can always go back to Ed Fioroni's Pavey. Sorry, Ed.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of respect for MBAs at that point. Anyway, Gary, thanks for taking the time to come up. I greatly appreciate it.
Sure.
And thanks for your hard work and involvement, because coming from the West Coast out here each time we have meetings and everything else is a bit of a bigger burden for you than the rest of us.
It is a trek.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Steve Jones with the Hardscape channel signing off.